Hello everybody, this is Anime Alternate here, hope you're having a wonderful day. This is What If Naruto Was Uchiha, part 5. This is actually, I think, my longest video I've ever made. It took a Herculean effort to make this thing, but yeah, I won't take a bunch of you guys' time, so I hope you guys enjoy, and enjoy the video. There was a sharp clanging sound as Naruto blocked a Tanto blade with his kunai. Currently, he was deep inside the forest outside of Konoha. His reason for being there was his opponent, a Root Anbu member. Ever elusive they were, but one at a time Naruto had managed to track them down and engage them in a fight. The Root member pushed harder against Naruto's much smaller kunai with his Tanto. It was a smart move considering the situation, but Naruto simply slid his kunai slightly farther down and closer to the hilt of his opponent's crossguard, thus negating their advantage. The screech of metal against metal was grating, and the Root Anbu made the mistake of looking up and into Naruto's eyes, something he had been avoiding doing the entire fight. But all it took was one slip-up, and Naruto caught him. Gotcha. In an instant, Naruto had the Root member trapped in the Genjutsu as he entered their mind. The mindscape was an interesting thing, as it reflected entirely on whose mind it was. Naruto had ambushed exactly 7 Root Anbu members, including this one, and each and every one of their minds had been almost identical. It was almost as if they had no personal identity, aside from different physical appearances. The mindscape was simply just a plain room, with memories floating in it as golden orbs. Naruto raised his hand, and an iron cage formed. It wasn't very large, but it didn't have to be. It would suit its purpose. Naruto didn't sigh, or show any outward reaction towards the monotony of what he was doing. He had done it 6 times before, and would do it many more times before his goal was accomplished. Mind control was a tedious thing, and very, very delicate. It required copious amounts of work to pull off correctly, and even then, that was with the aid of the Sharingan. So, as Naruto began sorting through the memories, he placed certain ones within the iron cage. The iron cage represented his direct sphere of influence within the target's mind. He only could affect them so much, so Naruto simply chose to have control over the memories and experiences, and, of course, the parts of the brain that impacted them the most. And side note, this is basically what Obito did to Yagura when Obito was saying that he was like Madara Uchiha. This is kind of how I reasoned it, because it was never really fully stated how Obito did this. But also, another quick side note, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the channel, as the YouTube algorithm hasn't really made it any easier. But anyway, other than that, let's get back to the video. Was it unethical? Very likely. But Naruto had stopped caring the moment he found out about Danzo's Sharingan arm. Danzo was now playing a game he didn't even know about, and Naruto was about to win. After a few minutes, Naruto was done. He pulled himself from the Root member's mind. They were staring blankly into space, and would be so for a couple more seconds. During that time, Naruto simply took a couple steps back and body flickered away. Time skip. 4 days before the invasion. In and out. In and out. Come on, Naruto. Pull yourself together. Naruto was standing outside a nondescript shack in the woods outside of Konoha. He was flanked by 2 Root Anbu members. He had, of course, used his... Naruto didn't actually know what to call his little hypnotizing thing, but he supposed it could be called an advanced Sharingan Genjutsu. Yes, you really like the sound of that. It sounded nice, regal, powerful almost. The 2 Root Anbu members were under an advanced Sharingan Genjutsus. It was finally time to spring his trap. Danzo's head was placed in the proverbial guillotine, and now all Naruto had to do was let the axe drop. Orochimaru, more likely than not, hadn't simply just shown up in the Hidden Leaf for kicks. If he was here, then it likely meant that something was going to happen, and something big at that. Not to mention, with the tuning exams going on, it would be much easier to mount an attack. Again, Also, the random bits of information that Naruto could get from the root agents presented him with a rather interesting conundrum. The root members, via the discretion seal on their tongues, were physically incapable of revealing any information about root or danzo. So, Naruto had to phrase his questions in ways that wouldn't reveal anything about root, but even the little bits of information that Naruto could glean from the root members did nothing to ease his stress. Something was happening, and he didn't like it. Or rather, frankly, he did not like knowing about it. To put it simply, Naruto was concerned, and he didn't know what to do. He could go to the Hokage, but, well, that would bring up questions he didn't want to answer, like, how did he know about Orochimaru's plan? Or, how did he know Orochimaru was in the leaf? And also, also leads to questions about how talented he was with his Sharingan and with his Mangekyou Sharingan, which almost nobody knew he had. Of course, the old man probably knew, as he was the Hokage. Nothing got past him. A quick glance towards his waist assured Naruto that his recently acquired swords were there. Naruto had picked up a regular-sized grass cutter sword and a shorter one with a total of 20 inches in length, and 12 for the blade and 8 for the handle. Both of them didn't have a guard. Oh, side note, these are basically the sword that Sasuke used like post time skip, except one of them is like shorter, and like the one that's shorter I described, like, you know, like around 20 inches long with, like, you know, 12 inches for the blade and 8 inches for the handle. But back to the story. Let's go, Naruto said. And the two root members grabbed him by the arms and dragged him into the tunnel. Darkness engulfed Naruto's vision until his eyes adjusted, and even then he could barely see the two root members by his sides. If Naruto had to guess, he would say they walked for a mile at least, and it was also at a never so slight decline. At the end of the walk, they arrived at a bunker-like structure. There were a couple of guards, so Naruto slumped to make it seem like he was half unconscious. Though he didn't need to do much, the genjutsu he placed on the Anbu members were autonomous. It still drew a slight amount of chakra from him, but Naruto could keep it up, and he would do so he did so for the past several weeks. Though he did suffer from reduced chakra reserves, meaning he couldn't perform as well as he normally would be able to. But soon it would be over. Once Naruto had Danzo in his grasp, he would cast the genjutsu one last time. Danzo would be turned to a puppet, a figurehead. He could release his hold on all the other root members, and they would follow Danzo about blindly. This was in their nature. This was how they operated. Who is this? Naruto's head snapped up. He hadn't realized they had traversed so quickly into the base, but he didn't have time to lose his wits. Now was definitely not the time. Ah, the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Danzo stared down his nose at Naruto, who by this point in time had been forced to his knees. The guards on the other side of Naruto stood motionless. Danzo still also hadn't moved from his large marble throne cloaked in shadows. It was at this point in time Naruto started wondering if he had played himself into... Ah, you're seeing it now, Danzo chuckled, as Naruto's eyes widened. I caught your little sleeper cells you tried to send into my organization, and I must give you props. But my organization, Root, is too effective to be taken down by the likes of something like that. Although I must thank you. You have acted as a test for my organization. Not bad indeed. I mean, 3 agents, that is quite something after all, for someone of your level. Naruto paused. It appeared Danzo hadn't caught all of his sleeper agents. The 2 that were holding him captive were obviously caught and released from Naruto's mind-controlled genjutsu. But if Naruto was correct, then 3 or 4 of them were still in this room or close to it. Not ideal, but if he could free himself, then maybe he could just beat Danzo. The 3 other agents he could give the order to try and keep everyone else away, to try and let no one else interfere in this fight. Naruto gave a bitter chuckle, keeping his act up. This is what arrogance, the Uchiha arrogance, gets me. And after I tried... No, there's no try. First I had to get out of here, Naruto thought hard. What Naruto didn't see was most minute upward quirk of Danzo's lips as he saw Naruto's eyes give away his plan of trying to break free. Danzo's eyes briefly flickered down Naruto's neck to where a hidden explosive tag lay. It had been placed during the time period where Naruto had thought he had blanked out, but in reality it was a minor genjutsu by one of the guards escorting him down here. The tag couldn't be remotely set off because it had been placed without the use of chakra to avoid Naruto noticing it before it went off. By all means, Jinchuriki, try, Danzo thought. Try and break free. The second you move, the tag on your neck will go off. And once you die, I'll simply use my Sharingan to control the Ninetales. So, I implore you, try, Jinchuriki. Naruto breathed in deeply, before breathing out. He breathed in deeply once more, before breathing out again. He repeated this process 3 more times before, in an instant, his Sharingan activated. First to the base form, then to the Mangekyou, and then Naruto's right eye ability, and he turned intangible. There was a loud bang as the tag that had previously been placed on his neck went off, violently tossing the guards standing next to him away. They weren't dead, as they had been in the process of leaping away already, but they were most certainly unconscious. Step 1 down, Naruto thought. You think you can challenge me, boy? Danzo spat as he stood up. The golden bands and bandages around his arm and the bandages around his eye fell off, revealing his Sharingan. But what got Naruto the most was the pattern of Shizui's eye embedded in Naruto's skull. In Danzo's skull. In an instant, the rage that Naruto had long since kept suppressed had resurfaced. It burned in him like a giant furnace, sending waves of anger rippling throughout him. His body started to shake, his vision turned red. Naruto was too angry to even speak. A quick pulse of his chakra, and the 4 sleep regions spread throughout the compound started converging on his position. Well, not entirely. Their job was to keep everything and everyone away from this fight. You dare take my clan's eyes. You dare take... Naruto's voice cracked. You dare take Shizui's eyes, he finally choked out. What the old man had told him from before did nothing to prepare him for right now. He was mad, and Danzo had hell to pay for it. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna take them all back. And then, I'm gonna return to you 1,000-fold what you did to them. Naruto sent out a quick apology to Sasuke in his head. Right now, he was too enraged to even care about his promise to Sasuke. Right now, he needed to focus on himself, even if it was a bit selfish. I'd like to see you try, Danzo drawled out. Naruto could handle his rage no longer. He sprung forward, drawing his swords. The longer sword was held in his right hand, while the shorter one was held in a reverse grip with his left hand. Naruto whipped out with the sword in his right hand, but Danzo dodged. Naruto smirked vindictively as he blurred forward. Then, a blade appeared in Danzo's hands before he and Naruto started training blow after blow, and cut after cut. Then, Naruto flicked out with his longer blade, shifting Danzo's blade to the side. Naruto followed it up with the blade in his left hand, stabbing it into Danzo's chest. A smirk appeared on his face, but then it vanished as Danzo disappeared. Now? Naruto thought. That bastard's using Izanagi, as if he owns those eyes. There was a loud bang, and from a massive cloud of smoke, an enormous Baku formed. Naruto's eyes widened. The Baku were thought to be myth, able to suck the dreams from someone's head. If even a hint of this was correct, it was likely that genjutsu used on the surrounding area would be negated. Naruto glared at Danzo, who was standing on top of the Baku's head. Not so tough now, are you? Danzo asked snidely. I guess this is the end for you. You may. Kill him. The massive beast gave a huge rumble before it pointed its trunk at Naruto and started breathing in. Naruto stumbled back slightly before leaning backwards to try and resist the pull of the beast. Air was flying in its direction, creating a vacuum behind. Fine, if Danzo wants to play that way, so can I, Naruto all but snarled in his head. A deep breath in and a deep breath out was all that Naruto did before a massive silvery shroud exploded outwards from his body, turning into a sizable silver-armored Susanoo. And on his arm was Naruto's most proud accomplishment, even more than the billions in Naruto's Mangekyou eyes. The Yada Mirror. The Yada Mirror only manifested on a Susanoo whose user had the ability to weather all conditions. Naruto's ultimate defense that put his Susanoo on a whole different level from anyone else's, except for perhaps Itachi's, who, if Naruto was correct, also had the Yada Mirror. The Yada Mirror, Danzo said. I have to give you props for that, but now you're a sitting duck. Yume can keep up a vacuum indefinitely. And while you sit there, all the air is getting sucked towards her. As much as Naruto wanted to fire back with a snarky remark, he couldn't. It was true. The enormous Baku was a force to be reckoned with, and Naruto couldn't fight back against it. But then, Naruto remembered something. He was in Naruto's Jinchuriki. It was time to use that. Naruto once again closed his eyes and breathed in and out. It seemed like today was the day to pull out new abilities out of thin air. And by side note, guys, I apologize if Naruto seemed overpowered. I kind of wanted to try this out because I had some cool ideas for this, but anyways, back to the story. Naruto's eyes snapped open once more before he screamed in pain, as the seal in his stomach burned red hot and a maroonish colored sludge ripped itself from Naruto's skin. The seal faded away as it was now broken, and the sludge increased in size and mass rapidly before forming into the Kyuubi. But there was something off. It didn't announce its presence with a roar, but instead just sat there, lifelessly. Its eyes weren't the normal vertical slit, but instead its pupils were replaced with a normal 3-tomy Sharingan. Naruto's eyes burned, and he felt like his vision was getting progressively worse with each passing second. But he couldn't give up now. He had to push on. He had to. He had done what few others had done before, controlled a tailed beast, and the Kyuubi at that. But now was not the time to let that go to his head. Kill the Baku, Naruto ordered, and the Kyuubi was quick to respond. It leapt forward. Ample room to move around in an underground bunker gave it a huge range of mobility. First, its claws grabbed onto the Baku's front legs before its fangs sunk into its throat. The vacuum was cancelled and Naruto released his Susanoo, which he realized might have been a bad idea, as the Baku Yume, as Danzo had called it, and the Kyuubi started tussling. Debris and rubble from their grapple flew everywhere, cutting into Naruto's clothes and across his skin. Danzo had leapt off the Baku, and Naruto capitalized. He threw his arms out, and a black sphere formed in front of it. His right eye ability manifested, and his body groaned in protest. Naruto's weight of nature ability clearly was something else, but Naruto forced through the pain. Naruto roared out as he jumped into the air. His small grass cutter blade was still in his left hand. Danzo was too stunned to respond as he was pulled through the air and towards Naruto, courtesy of Naruto's weight of nature jutsu, or rather, weight of nature ability. He had used gravity in a single direction to pull Danzo towards him. Naruto quickly lashed out, and Danzo's left arm was quickly removed. This was followed closely by Naruto reaching forward and removing Danzo's last Sharingan from his head, by simply just ripping out of his skull. The two of them fell to the floor. Danzo landed heavily on his back, while Naruto landed unstably on his feet near them. Blood stained Naruto's clothes and dripped down from his blade. Naruto raised up his right hand and stared at Shizui's eye resting on his palm. Who's challenging who now? Naruto said. He idly noted that the Baku was dead, and the Kyuubi still, once again, sat lifeless in the background. For your crimes, I sentence you to death, Naruto said as Danzo sat up. If I'm dying, so are you, brat! Danzo roared out as he reached for something. Nope, I'm good, Naruto said in a peppy voice, and before Danzo could do anything, Naruto flicked his blade out, and Danzo's head fell to the floor. All his rage faded away. Danzo had lost. He'd paid for his crimes, but there was a sound of shifting rubble, and Naruto snapped his head around to see dozens of root members all staring at him. All of them had their tanto out, and Naruto was beginning to question if they would attack him next. He suddenly prepared his blade and slipped his right hand, which held Shizui's eye, behind his back. He would need to protect it. He would not let Shizui's eyes be lost to him once again. Danzo is dead, Naruto announced, hoping some sort of words would prevail in this situation. Some sort of diplomacy would prevail, and he would not have to get into another fight. I am your leader. Rather presumptuous of Naruto, but he hoped it would send a strong message across. The root members were not leaders, they were simply followers. The root member holding Naruto's sword, as Naruto realized that he had lost his longer sword, as he only held his shorter one in his left hand, walked forward. The root member stood in front of Naruto. Then, in a surprising move, the root member kneeled down, presenting Naruto's sword to him. Thank you, Naruto said, first sheathing the blade in his left hand before grabbing the blade the root member was presenting to him and sheathing that one as well. Shizui's eye was still in Naruto's right hand. Naruto then turned to the Kyuubi and reached out his hand. Sleep. The Kyuubi jerked in protest, but then lowered itself to the ground before wrapping its tails around itself and curling into a ball. Keep an eye on it, Naruto told the root shinobi in front of him. The root shinobi nodded, but then Naruto collapsed. Time skip. Next morning. Naruto stared out the window. While he had been fighting Danzo, things had been happening above ground. Orochimaru had finally made his move. Orochimaru had slipped into the Hokage Tower with a 5-man team and tried to assassinate Lord Third. The 5-man team was supposedly monikered the bodyguards of Orochimaru, or the Sound Five. The entire building had been sectioned off with a barrier jutsu, trapping Lord Third along with Kakashi, Guy, Kurenai, and Asuma inside. All of them were heavily injured, with the Lord Third being placed into a coma. But they had prevailed. Orochimaru's squad was killed, and he had been captured. He was under heavy lock and key, kept under multiple genjutsus and put into a forced sleep. But the damage had been done. The leaf was unstable, and Naruto was sure that the other villages would soon catch wind of it. So Naruto devised a solution. It was rather risky, but if it worked, it would have a high payoff. Naruto was having one of his root shinobi impersonate Danzo for the time being. It was rather nice. The root shinobi had fallen in line nicely, and there hadn't been a single hiccup as from the transition of power from the now dead Danzo to Naruto. But back to the plan Naruto was going to use. The Danzo lookalike, aka the root shinobi disguised as him, would then assume the title of Hokage, as there really was no one else to challenge him. The civilian council would try and gain as much power as possible, but Naruto had accounted for that too. It wouldn't be out of character for Danzo to simply get rid of the entire council just because. He was known as the Warhawk after all. The Danzo lookalike would then take his orders from Naruto, eventually promoting Naruto to being his replacement when the time came. Or rather, the Danzo lookalike would take Naruto under his wing as a protege until Naruto was ready to assume the position of Hokage. But Naruto didn't just want stability. He wanted the world. He wanted everything to be peaceful. The Danzo lookalike would then make a power play for the Land of Water and the Hidden Mist. First assassinating the daimyo of the Land of Water, and in the process acquiring all of the Land of Water, besides the Hidden Village. Then, he would go after the 3 and 6-tailed beasts, while simultaneously acquiring the 7 tails from the Hidden Waterfall. Then, Naruto would assassinate the daimyo of the Land of Wind. Following that would be the capture of the One-Tails, and the annexation of the Land of Wind and the Hidden Sound. The village hidden in the mist was already in a civil war, so once the 3 and 6-tailed beasts were captured, the village would soon fall under line. The village would soon fall into line. And before anyone could react, the hidden leaf, or rather Naruto's new empire, as he had planned to hopefully moniker it, would control half of the continent and 5 of the Biju. Then it was on to Iwagakure, which was basically a rinse and repeat of the Land of Wind and the Land of Water. Assassinate the daimyo, isolate the hidden village, then lay siege to it if peaceful terms couldn't be reached. Or rather, actually, assassinate the daimyo, isolate the hidden village, capture the tailed beasts, acquire all the land in the country, then lay siege to the village if peaceful terms couldn't be reached. Naruto corrected himself. Once he had acquired all the tailed beasts, he would use them to form the Jubi, and his conquest would be complete. With the Jubi under his control, nothing would be impossible. Of course, there were some major road bumps, Naruto thought, but those would be addressed when he got to them. The real problem was standing in front of him, in the form of a very tired and very lazy Shikamaru Nara. Naruto had to give props to him. His classmate and fellow Genin was a genius. He'd almost instantly seen Naruto's power play and moved to intercept. How, Naruto had no idea. His dealings with the Root Anbu members had been very, very covert. But the odd thing about Shikamaru was that it didn't appear as if he wanted to even stop Naruto. "So what is it you want?" Naruto spoke, finally breaking the silence. Shikamaru gave a long-winded sigh as he rolled his neck. He seemed like he didn't want to be here, which was natural considering who it was. You're staging a coup, Shikamaru began. Not exactly, Naruto said, cutting Shikamaru off. I'm not overthrowing anybody. Our Hokage is unable to lead, and probably won't be able to ever again. His top Jonin are also incapacitated. It is the destiny, in my opinion, of every generation to surpass the one before it. I am simply fulfilling that. And the thousands of lives that we sacrifice in the process for your conquest. Shikamaru's voice never changed in pitch or tone, simply staying at a boring monotony as he asked Naruto these hard questions. It really tested Naruto's resolve, what his motives were, how strong they were. A war will happen regardless of what I do, Naruto responded. The Hidden Cloud are too greedy to not try and capitalize on the least weakness. They will attempt to kidnap another Hyuga like they tried to do to Hinata Hyuga years before, or a bloodline carrier in the hopes of breeding them into recreating the bloodline in their own village. They really are sick like that, Naruto spat. Then, there is the Hidden Stone, who, likely out of vengeance, will support any assault on Konoha, if not start their own. Naruto took a deep breath before continuing. I want a world of peace. And if I have to use violence and war to take over the entire world to do so, then so be it. Naruto and Shikamaru stared at each other for quite some time more before Shikamaru finally spoke again. I fully agree with you, Naruto. But if you're going to take over the world, then you're going to need someone to help you strategize. That would be me. As every Hokage before you, and every Hokage likely after you. Or, I don't know if there will even be a Hokage system after you're done. Or will it be an empire? Naruto gave a slight nod. Well then, an empire, then I guess, will need an advisor. And the Nara clan are the best of the best. And the laziness traits? Naruto questioned. Not important, Shikamaru responded. And to answer your question from earlier, I want for my clan to be important in this new empire. I want for my clan to have the first pick of the group after your clan, of course. Shikamaru paused, staring out the window. Naruto motioned for Shikamaru to continue, and Shikamaru nodded before walking over and sitting in a chair near Naruto's bedside. Naruto smirked. I like your style, Shikamaru. And thank you. Before you start your surgery, Shikamaru gestured at the two eyes floating in the glass jars on the table next to Naruto's bedside. They were Sharingan, or more specifically, Shizui's Sharingan. One he'd pulled from Danzo's head, and the other one he'd pulled from the crow Itachi had placed him all those years ago. It was, in Naruto's humble opinion, high time for him to ascend to the next level of power. The eternal Mangekyou Sharingan would provide that for him. It would revive all the power he needed in spades. His eyesight would be restored, and he could finally move his plans into action. So, Shikamaru said, about to finish his statement from earlier. Tell me about this plan of yours, Shikamaru finished. Anyway guys, thanks for listening. This is probably one of the longest videos I've ever recorded, but I really hope you guys enjoy. And so without further ado, goodbye, Anime Ultimate signing off, and I hope you guys enjoyed.